Hey, next on the T Nation, thanks for tuning into this special bonus segment of the show featuring my conversation with Rick Werner. Rick is one of the top teaching professionals in our game. He's played in 10 National Club Pro Championships. He won the Ohio PGA Section Championship in 1979, and he's about to be inducted into the South Dakota Golf Hall of Fame. Thanks again for listening and for making Next on the Tee a part of your weekly golf content. Enjoy the segment. Okay, now making his Next on the Tee debut with me is Rick Werner. Let me give you some background on Rick. He is from Lexington, Virginia, played his college golf at the University of South Dakota. In 1973, he won the South Dakota Golf Association Amateur Championship, and that year he was also the medalist in the North Central Conference Tournament, and he was named All-American. Rick had 2 top 10 finishes in the National Club Pro Championship. In 1979, he won the Ohio PGA Section Championship. He's been a teaching professional at great clubs like Quaker Ridge in Scarsdale, New York. He's been the director of golf at the Country Club of Ashland, Ohio, and he retired as the director of golf at Royal Point Siena Golf Club in Naples, Florida. Rick also served as the men's golf coach at Washington and Lee University from 2007 to 2012. Next week, he's going to be inducted into the South Dakota Golf Hall of Fame. He came highly recommended to me by our friend Bill Mallon, and I couldn't be more excited to have him with me here today on Next on the Tee. Hey, Rick, thanks for coming on the show.
Chris, I appreciate that. Nice introduction. You're doing your homework, man.
I try. So, Rick, I want to start out our time today by going back to your early days. I'm sort of curious, how does a kid from Lexington, Virginia end up playing his college golf at the University of South Dakota?
Actually, Chris, I grew up in Huron, South Dakota. And from there, I went to the University of South Dakota. But I grew up first 23 years. I grew up in Huron, South Dakota.
So you had a tremendous amount of success in South Dakota at the university, as a matter of fact. And I was curious to get your thoughts. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about your time at the University of South Dakota playing men's golf?
Well, we had it's kind of a limited program. I mean, it's a short season up there. We played 3 or 4 matches in the spring and a couple in the fall. But I had a great coach, Dwayne Clodfelter. He was just a wonderful individual, and he was an inspiration for me for golf and life in general. And as a matter of fact, he was the basketball coach there for years. And in 1958, USD won the national championship in their division. So coach is quite a guy, just a wonderful individual. So he really got me inspired. But I grew up playing my golf in Huron on a 9-hole sand green golf course. So I went from there to playing some of the best courses in the world. So it's been quite a trip, Chris.
And like I mentioned in your intro, Rick, we got introduced through Bill Mallon, former PGA Tour pro, who has become a fantastic doctor after his time out on tour. You guys were friends in high school, right?
Well, we actually met in about once I got out of college in about 1974 down at John's Island Club in Vero Beach. Bill was getting ready for the tour, and I was cleaning clubs and picking up the range. But we've been good friends for 50 years. He's quite a guy. As you know, Bill was he won everything in New England, All-American at Duke, got his tour card in like 75, played the tour for 4 years. And as I say, tour wasn't enough of a challenge for Bill, so we went back to med school, and he's just nationally known as an orthopedic surgeon, president of association. So he's just a wonderful individual.
He told me a story about when you were in high school, and for most guys my age, when I was in high school, most of my friends, they had the famous Farrah Fawcett poster on their wall. I came into liking Charlie's Angels a little bit after she left, and Cheryl Ladd was the poster I had on my wall. You do me one better. You dated Cheryl Ladd in high school.
Well, that's a little bit of a stretch. She was, Chris, her name was Sherry Stoppelmore, but she grew up and she was a year younger, and she lived about 2 blocks away. And I think she was so good looking. I think everybody's afraid to date her, but I don't know. I maybe met her at the movie one time or something like that. But yeah, she's quite a golf fanatic. She wrote a little book here years back, but yeah, she's quite a golf fanatic. So yeah, she's a beautifully talented woman, and she went on to a lot of success there.
Going back to your playing career in 79, as I mentioned in your intro, you won the Ohio PGA section. There's a lot of great golf talent up in the state of Ohio. What do you remember about that event?
It's kind of interesting. I'll try not to drag it out, but In '79, we played at I'll try to think of the golf course. It'll come to me, but in Cleveland, I got paired with Charlie Sifford the first round, and I heard Charlie could be difficult and bitter in a way because he was tremendous talent in the '50s and early '60s, and as I understand, the PGA of America was Caucasian only until like 1967. So Charlie couldn't play, but I got paired with Charlie in the first round, and about the first 6 holes, he doesn't say anything. I don't say anything. I'm just staying out of his way and minding my own business. And about the sixth hole, the we got backed up, and I'm like 2 under. I mean, I'm just playing lights out for me. And Charlie comes over and says, "Son, you play pretty well." He said, "Who taught you to play?" And I said, "Well, Ken Venturi." And Charlie said, "Oh my goodness!" He just broke into a smile. He said, "Kenny's one of the good ones. He's one of the few that taught me with respect and invited me to play practice rounds and went to dinner." So we kind of became friends a little bit after that, and we went to. I was leading 69, and a couple good players. Jim McLean was a good player, won the USJ Junior, and Brian App, a lot of good players up there. Jim Logan. So at dinner, Charlie goes around the table after dinner. A lot of guys having a couple beers. And Charlie says, "Boys, who do you think's going to win tomorrow?" And it's, well, Masario or Abbott or whatever. Charlie said, "I tell you what, I'll take the kid that's leading against the field. Anybody want any of that action?" So before
Wow.
it's over with, make sure Charlie bet like $1,000, something like that. I mean, sitting next to Charlie. I said, "Charlie, I might shoot 89 tomorrow." He said, "Don't worry, kid, you'll be all right." Well, the next day, somehow, some way, I shot 67. I won by 5. At the presentation, I get my check for 400. I walk by Charlie, and he's smiling from ear to ear. Then he's got a handful of 50s and 100s, just smiling. He's a way to go, pro. Good playing. So I found Charlie to be just a fabulous human being. Contrary, grew up in tough times, but he was a wonderful individual, at least to me.
And you mentioned Ken Venturi. I read that you had played several rounds with Kenny and with Gene Sarazen as well. Had to be a huge thrill to get to spend time with those guys. What do you remember about the times you spent with both of them?
Well, this was down in Marco Island. I was hooked up with those gentlemen down in 1974, 75, whatever it was. And I probably played 150, maybe 200 rounds with Kenny. I mean, we played constantly for 20 years down there. And Kenny was a fabulous player. So, people remember the old white-haired guy on, telecast for 35 years. But, Kenny was All-American, NCAA All-American, Ryder Cup, Walker Cup, won 14 tour events, Rookie of the Year in 1957. 3 wins, of course, won the Open in '64, and we played a ton of golf. Then I get to meet Mr. Sarazen also down at Marco Island, and your audience out there is probably way too young to remember who Gene Sarazen is, but Mr. Sarazen was the first guy to win the career Grand Slam. He won 7 majors. He credited with inventing the modern day sand wedge. He told me in great detail how in 1935, how he won the 35 Masters. He was 3 behind, standing on 15, and he's paired with Walter. And he told a wonderful story about it. So, but he knocked in the double eagle, the shot heard around the world, and we'd get together. And Eric Parseghian lived down there at the time, and we played, the 3 of us and somebody else would be in the group. And we played 15, 20 times. Mr. Sears would tell the stories about Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen and Tommy Armour and Francis we met, and on and on and on. And then Coach would tell stories about coaching at Notre Dame. So it was a fantastic experience around people like that.
So you mentioned Eric Parseghian, another guy that had influence on your life, legendary head coach at Notre Dame. How'd getting to play with him and having the experience of not only playing with, being around him on the golf course, I imagine you got to spend some time with him off the golf course as well. What was it like spending time with Coach?
Well, Coach was a wonderful individual, and and he could play. Chris, he was a 2 handicap. You got to shoot par better to keep up with the coach, but he was a wonderful inspiration, and he had a fabulous sense of humor. And I attended one game at Notre Dame. I grew up in Huron, South Dakota, and my mother's Irish Catholic, so I was a Notre Dame fan in and out, and tough to cheer for the Golden Gophers next door in Minnesota, when they won about 1 game a year, So I was a Notre Dame fan, and before the game, Coach had retired, but I walked around campus before the game with him, and he was like, my goodness, he was, people come up, and I was walking with the coach, and he was telling me stories about Moose Krause, and he was just, he was dynamic, he was positive, he was funny, he was just fun, he was great to be around. wonderful individual.
Going back to your playing career, you also had 2 top 10 finishes in the National Club Pro Championship. You're sort of like the Michael Block of your time. Talk about those top 10s and competing against the best of your peers.
Well, I played well in 82 and 84 down in PGA Gardens at PGA National back then, and I did finish. I think both times I finished tied for 10th, and that was like the first alternate would have put me on the Club Pro Ryder Cup thing against the UK. And but I played well there for. It seemed like I either played well a couple times or I missed the cut. I think I played in seven national Club Pro championships. And playing well, it got me into playing the PGA at Riviera in '83 and Cherry Hills in '85. So, I mean, Chris. I mean, I just for me to come, from 9-hole sand green golf course from here on, I mean, it's been I've been very fortunate. I've been around some great people, and I made a comfortable living, doing something I just absolutely love.
And Rick, over the years, you were low professional in several South Florida Pro-Am tournaments. You set course records in Ohio and Florida. You shot scores of 62 and a couple of 63s. Talk about the places that you went out there, and next thing you know, you're setting a course record.
Yeah. I played at at Country Club of Ashland, which is a great old golf course. The front nine was designed by Willie Park Jr., just a fabulous 9 holes. And in the back nine, they added later on, long before I got there. But yeah, I went out and shot 62 there, I believe it was. And then twice at Royal Point Santa, we had 36 holes down there. And I shot 60, 63 and 63 on both golf courses. They've since made it much more difficult. I probably couldn't break 80 now, but back then, I mean, the one stretch there, I made 8 threes in a row in the front nine. So I
Wow.
mean, I just, Chris, my playing resume is very short, so you really did some digging to find up some couple times I played pretty well there. But yeah, I got to go in a couple times, like not very often, but I did a couple times. So I couldn't keep it up with Mellon, but I played all right a couple times there.
Speaking of that, did you spend it at all? Did you ever think about getting out on the PGA Tour, or did you decide early on that becoming a teaching professional was where your calling was at?
Well, Chris, I won the South Dakota State Am in 1973. And I mean, the logical next step for me is the PGA Tour, right? So I go down to the Q School down in Las Colinas Country Club in Irvine, Texas. And it was a two-stager back then, and I missed going to the second stage by maybe 4 shots. Didn't play great, but I didn't play my best, but I still played pretty good. So I was finishing up, and I finished on back nine. I shot 36, and I'm thinking, that's pretty good for me. I probably had 9 putts. I don't know, but so I'm thinking, that they're talking about this young phenom coming out of the University of Texas, and I thought, well, I'll watch him play the back nine just to see how I'm going to stack up. Who's my competition come the next year? Well, I watched old General Ben Crenshaw shoot 29 on that 9 holes, and I thought he was going to fall asleep out there. And so I shot, watched. Let's see, old Ben just cut me by 7 shots on 9 holes. And I said, man, I can learn how to sell shirts and teach if I'm going to be in the golf business. So that was the extent. That was the extent of my PGA Tour aspirations right there.
You started to mention Quaker Ridge, a wonderful golf club. It's a historic Tillinghast design up in Scarsdale, New York, known as Tilly's Treasure. It's regularly ranked as one of the top courses in the world, let alone here in our country. It dates back to the early 1900s. I even read that George Washington and his troops are said to have spent time on the property in 1776. But what was it like being there at Quaker Ridge?
I was a teaching professional there in 75, 76, and 77. And Chris, I'll guarantee you, I played that golf course 300 times over those 3 years. I mean, like you mentioned, it's a Tillinghast golf course, and he was by far my favorite architect of the golden age of architecture back then. It was just a fabulous golf course. And I think, as a matter of fact, Byron Nelson won his first tournament up there in like 37 or 38 at Quaker. It was called the Metropolitan Open, which was a huge event up there. And it's a great old Tillinghast golf course. There's a picture in the clubhouse there that shows a picture of A.W. Tillinghast, and he's got his 3-piece suit on, a fedora hat or whatever they call him, and he's standing out there in waist high weeds, and he's looking at this chart, and this is how the guy designed the golf course. I mean, he was a genius, and they had to use horse-drawn sleds to build the thing, and even today it's still considered one of the great golf courses around. It's a real treasure. So, as a matter of fact, I got to know J.C. Snead a little bit at the Homestead. And JC was in that part of the country, and I mentioned Quaker Ridge, and he said, Quaker Ridge was Sam's favorite golf course in the Northeast. So that'll give you some idea what Quaker Ridge really is. It was just a great golf course.
Yeah, and I've heard that of all the great golf courses, and there's so many out there on Long Island, I've heard people talk about how, boy, they'd really have to think about it. If they had an opportunity to play Shinnecock or Quaker Ridge, it would be a real decision because Quaker Ridge is just that great.
I've been fortunate over the years to play a lot of the top, for years, the top 20 out of 25 or whatever. And, Pebble and Cypress and Augusta and Pebble, I'd drop some names on you here, and Pine Valley. But Quaker Ridge has always been one of my top five. It's one of those hidden jewels. It's a very private, small membership, and it was just a great experience. I tell people, if they ever get a chance, don't ever pass it up because it's one of the good ones, no doubt about it.
All right, so everybody that listens to this show regularly knows that Augusta National is my favorite place on the planet. You threw out there, you kind of breezed through that you've played at Augusta. Tell me what that was like.
I got to play it twice, and it was, I was friends with Dave Spencer, who was a golf professional there. And anyway, I got to play it one time on the way down to Florida, and then I had a member, Maury Watt from Chicago, and he was a member. And a long story, we took the private jet up and played 27 and on and on and on. I mean, I grew up. Back in the late 50s, whatever, on TV was we wait for the Masters to come on, and then you get a chance to play it. It's just absolutely fabulous. And we know what it's like. I mean, the elevation changes, the severity of the greens, and all the history there. It was something to behold. It's one of the great experiences of my life. So it's special.
You've also got to spend some time with other great instructors in our game, guys like Jim McLean, who's a wonderful friend of this show. You've spent some time with John Jacobs, David Ledbetter, Hank Haney, Bob Toski, Davis Love Jr. Tell me about getting to spend time with them. Did you pick their brains and incorporate a little bit of each of them into your teaching methods, or what impacts did those guys have on you?
Well, after Jim had been accompanied by 7 shots, like I said, I got to learn how to teach. And I didn't know a thing about teaching. I think I read Hogan's 5 Fundamentals, and which is a weak grip, cup it open, cup it at the top, unwind the hips, which is, Chris, which would be great medicine for a world full of slicers. My students went from a little slice to a big slice to a shank, so I was able to spend time with a lot of the fellows you mentioned. To me, John Jacobs was John. They were all great teachers. They were all wonderful, spectacular teachers, and very accommodating to me. But John Jacobs, to me, was the best I ever saw, Chris. He was. And somebody said why, and I said 2 words: simplicity and results. Fabulous, fabulous teacher. So Jim McLean and I have been good friends. Jim was at Westchester Country Club teaching when I was at Quaker Ridge, and we'd play golf 3-4 days a week. So we've been good friends since 1975. And you mentioned Hank Haney and David Ledbetter and Bob Toski and Jim Flick, and Davis Love Jr. was Mr. Love was just a fabulous individual. I didn't get to know all those people that well, but I watched him. I would spend hours and days at a time. I'd catch an airplane flight at Naples, Florida, at 6 o'clock in the morning, fly to Orlando, rent a car, and go watch John Jacobs teach all day, and then catch the flight home. I mean, it was just an opportunity to watch some of those people teach. It was just a wonderful experience for me.
Some others that I read that had influence on you were Jackie Burke and Byron Nelson. That's a heck of a Texas connection, getting to spend some time with those two guys. What was that like?
Well, I got to know Jackie a little bit. Jim McLean comes on your program. Have Jim talk about Jackie Burke, because he was really, Jim's really good friends with Jackie. But I got to know Jackie and took a lesson from him, and he's one of the smartest individuals, golf and business and life, I've ever met in my life. And he wrote a wonderful book called "It's Only a Game." And your listeners out there, if they want a good read, I mean, don't pass up reading Jackie Burke's "It's Only a Game." It's a sensational book, and Jackie was just a wonderful individual, and Jackie was a tough guy. I mean, he was a good guy, but he was a tough guy. In World War II, he was in the Marines. He taught physical fitness and hand-to-hand combat to Marines that were going over to Southeast Asia, out of the Southeast Pacific. So, but he was a good guy. Jackie was a good player. He played in 7 Ryder Cups. He won the Masters and the PGA in '56. He's the last guy to win 4 tournaments in a row. I mean, Tiger won 7 or 8 in a row, but Jackie won 4 in a row, 4 consecutive tournaments, which he did in '52, I think it was. So, he was a sensational player and a fantastic putter. And I think Jim McLean, if Jim McLean told me a story about Jackie, and again, Jimmy's a lot better, more acquainted than Jackie and I, but Jimmy told me a story about Billy Ray Brown going for a putting lesson. Jackie was a great putter. Mickelson and Crenshaw, and they all went for lessons and putting lessons, but Billy Ray went for a putting lesson, and Billy Ray was a good player, All-American at Houston, won 3 times on the tour, so he could really play. So he goes out for a putting lesson with Jackie, and Jackie throws 3 balls down about 4 feet away, and Billy Ray makes the first 2, and then he lips out the third one. He says, "Oh, darn it." Well, Jackie took his putter that he had in his hand, grabbed it by the head and whacked Billy Ray across the back of the legs. And Billy Ray said it went down like it was shot. And he said he looked up at Jackie and he said, "Jackie, what's that for?" And he said, "Son, when you miss a putt, I want you to feel some pain." I mean,
Wow.
get Jimmy to tell you some Jackie Burke stories. I mean, it's a wonderful. I mean, again, I didn't know him as well as a lot of people, but when I was around him, he was just dynamic and positive, and he was something else. So, yeah, get that book, folks, out there if you want to read good read there on golf.
You were also the director of golf at Royal Poinciana Golf Club down in Naples, Florida. My good friend, another top instructor in our game, Tom Patry's down there in Naples at Crown Colony. Royal Poinciana, to your earlier points, got a couple of really nice golf courses on it now. It looks like a wonderful club. Talk about your time in Naples.
It was I was down there director of golf for 23 years, and I was coming out of Ashland, Ohio. I actually had no chance whatsoever to get the job, but I got an interview somehow, my resume, the top name and the references were Ken Venturi and Gene Sarazen, and the guy went and interviewed Mr. Sarazen, his doctor who he knew, and Mr. Sarazen said, "Oh, that Rick Werner, he's a good one. Don't let him get away." So, somehow I got the job. It's a fabulous club. It's just a wonderful membership, and it was a great experience. They were just wonderful people down there. So and I had so many good people working for me, which made my job a lot easier. But it's a wonderful club down there. A lot of good clubs down there now, but when I was down there, there were only a couple. So it's RP is one of the good ones, definitely. I think they still have a 9-year waiting list to get in. They had 9 years to get in when I was down there. I
Jeez.
know that. So it's a good one.
You are a member of this year's South Dakota Hall of Fame class. The banquet's coming up next week. What's it going to be like for you to get recognized by your peers, the state of South Dakota, and then be up there on the podium in front of family and friends, getting recognized for all the great accomplishments you've had in your career?
Yeah, I'll probably choke like a dog when I get up there on that stage. I know that. But, growing up in South Dakota, and Chris, I left right after I got out of college in 1973. So I've been gone for 50 years. And to get the call, and it, it means a lot. That's all I can say. It means a lot.
No
So
doubt.
I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll practice my speech and try not to choke too bad. But there's so many good people out there, so many friends I haven't seen in a long time. We're really looking forward to it.
You've had a positive impact on so many people over the course of your career. As you think about your speech and you think about looking back over your time in the game and all the people that you've touched, got to bring a smile to your face to know what a positive impact you've had on so many people.
Well, that's nice for you to say. I hope I did. I just I tried to be Rick Warner and do my best, and I was nothing special. I just tried to do a good job. But some of the names we mentioned earlier, they were so positive influence on me and inspirations and role models. And probably anything I learned, I just passed on. It's like some of the kids, that call them kids, some of the guys that worked for me, some of the people I was around. So I mean, golf, Chris, growing up, like I said, in Huron, South Dakota, playing a 9-hole sand green golf course, and going as far as I have, and I was never player of the year or teacher of the year or anything like that, but I had a wonderful experience as a golf professional, and it's something that I'll treasure forever. And going into the South Dakota Hall of Fame with some of a lot of my good friends, and we're really looking forward to it. But it's been a good ride, this golf thing.
As you think about your career and all the people that have worked with you and around you, I imagine you have a pretty extensive coaching tree. They talk about, Bill Belichick and his coaching tree and all the folks that have worked with and around him. I imagine you have a pretty impressive one. Who are some of the great people that you brought into the game that have now gone on in their areas and in, their careers and have done really great things?
Well, I was fortunate because I always try to hire, I say somebody smarter than me, which it didn't take too much, but I always tried to hire good people because I knew if they would make a golf professional look good or bad, but I always tried to hire good people. And I was fortunate to have some excellent young men and women that worked with me there. And several went on to be head golf professionals. And one of my good friends, he's Jim McLean's right-hand man, Glenn Farnsworth. He's probably the best unknown people don't know about, the teaching with Jimmy down there in Doral and South Florida for 30 years. And John Allen, a good friend of mine, he's been over at Sunnydale Golf Club in Philadelphia for decades. And I've had so many, and it's just hard to, but if I had a positive influence on all those people, I'm glad I did, but they had a positive influence on me too. I know that. So it's been a good run.
Rick, before I let you go, what's next for you? I know you left Naples and retired from down there, but what's next up for you?
Well, we're living up in Lexington, Virginia. It's a nice little town, about 8,000. We got two good universities here, VMI and Washington Lee University, and we got 5 grandchildren and a wonderful golf course. And we spend time here, and we're going to go down and spend a little bit of time down at PGA Village after the first year. So I've got my wife here. She's my lovely wife, Judy. She got down to a 10 handicap. It's gone back up a little bit because of the grandchildren, keep her busy. But we play golf and just enjoy a simple life up here in the Shenandoah Valley. So things are still going good for us here, Chris.
Rick, is there a way for our listeners to stay up to date with you, whether it's following you online or it's on social media?
Oh my goodness, Chris. I gotta say, I'm stuck in the '60s, Chris. I don't even know how to. I can barely text, so I'm not into any of that at all. So believe me, there's not that much going on. But my wife Judy can pick up on some of that stuff. But I still do snail mail. I still get the envelope in the mailbox sometimes.
That's great. Well, Rick, it has been great getting to spend time with you and having you as part of the show this week. I hope we get the privilege of catching up with you again sometime soon, because I feel like with all the people that you've been in and around and all the things that you've done over the course of your career, we've just really scratched the surface on the great things that you got to be a part of. I hope we get the opportunity to do again sometime soon.
Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough, and we really enjoy your program. So good luck with your program, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Congrats again on the Hall of Fame. All the best to you, your wife, Judy, and the family. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Chris.
See you, Rick.
Bye-bye.
That was the great Rick Werner. And again, he's going next week into the South Dakota Golf Hall of Fame. The number of things that Rick got to do and be a part of, and the people that he was around and learned from, really speaks to what a great player and person he was. He's very humble, really downplays his impact, but the number of places that he's been, the number of people that he got to be a part of and got to know and wanted to be around him, and he got to be around, tremendous. And I'm sure his coaching tree is just as big and full as it could possibly be. We're going to try to get some of the guys that he mentioned to come on the show and talk about Rick and obviously their careers, but and then obviously follow up with Jim McLean and Bill Mallon as well. But Rick's a tremendous player and a tremendous guy, and like I say, just far too humble. I really thank him for his time tonight and being a part of this week's show, And like I say, I hope we get the privilege of getting a little bit deeper into some of the things and the people that he got to do over the course of his career. Get back in touch with him again soon. All right, my friends, it is time for me to put a bow on this very special segment of Next on the Tee. Scheduled to join me next week are top 50 LPGA instructor Kelly Stenzel. We'll be back on the show. I've been trying to get Kelly back on for a while now, so it's going to be great to finally get an opportunity to catch up with her. 7-time Canadian ladies long drive champion Lisa Longball Vluswick will make a long overdue return to the show. And like I mentioned earlier, Gabby Powell's co-host on 3 Courses, Hannah Liner, will join me as well. So it's going to be a really fun show, folks. I hope you'll come back and join us and be a part of it with us. Folks, you can find this show available as a podcast just about everywhere you get your podcast content. In particular, we're out there on triblive.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audio Boom, Player.fm, and on Good Pods. And my thanks to those folks for making this show one of their recommended podcasts. Please download their free app and stream your favorite podcast right there on your favorite device. But most of all, my sincere thanks to all of you for being the greatest supporters in the history of podcasts. I appreciate you all so very much. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.